why is it that we live in a society with such, we live in a world with such kind of deep inequalities? How are those inequalities kind of legitimised so we can all get on with our lives without worrying too much about them? And at that point, you immediately enter into questions of racism, because what defines the way in which we think about those questions is actually, in the end, a kind of racial division of the world, where it's racial difference that legitimises the idea that actually we can absolve ourselves of responsibility here, because after all, Somalia is a war zone not because of anything we've done. It's just that's what the people there are like. The moment you start using language like that, you're actually involved in a kind of racial game. People who experienced colonialism have always seen that environmental issue as integral to it, and the sort of stories that people tell of how colonialism impacted on their lives always seem to me to have that environmental element within it, even though they probably wouldn't use the term environmental. You would be hard pushed to find organisations that consider themselves to be working in the field of race relations and kind of immigrant rights to have much of an element of environmentalism to them. There's been one or two attempts to do that, well, not to do that, but to kind of say we need a black environmental organisation, that kind of thing, but not an integration of environmental issues with anti-racist issues, which is something slightly different. I think is a matter of going back to trying to create some kind of wider perspective for understanding what is going on with the kind of environmental damage that is being wreaked on poorer countries, and trying to understand that as a form of imperialism, actually. But that's a kind of quite a large theoretical project and quite a leap for most people. Clearly, what will happen is that the kind of existing techniques and mechanisms that European governments have to try and police migration will be intensified massively. And it's already a kind of military model. You have the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force involved in policing immigration already by kind of patrolling sea routes that are considered to be routes for people to cross into Europe. Now, you can imagine a scenario where preventing people from entering Europe from outside becomes almost the primary role of the military in Europe. That will involve very large numbers of people actually dying as their attempts to enter Europe will be thwarted. At that point, you will find that European governments will have to have some kind of way to legitimise what is basically a war on poor people. And I suspect the kind of ideas that will emerge in that process will be ideas about civilization and about actually, in the end, why it's necessary for us to do this is to defend some idea of civilization, our way of life, our culture, and to protect that from being swamped by vast numbers of people who supposedly don't share that culture. And so you will get a very intense kind of idea of civilization under threat, the West under threat, the West in danger of being swamped, this kind of stuff, which is in a way is kind of it's a kind of neo-colonial discourse, but taking what it strikes me as is the kind of ideas about the West that you got in the run-up to Nazism, where It wasn't so much about a confidence of the West and a confidence of the West being able to go out and colonise other countries, but a fear that the West is on its last legs, and unless drastic measures are taken, it will die. And there's that kind of quite deep pessimism, I think, that will be there, that will be a kind of central idea in justifying what I think will happen. So there's a massive amount of kind of fear wrapped up in that will be politically mobilised in what I assume will be a more extreme way, actually, than what we've seen in the war on terror and the kind of war on asylum seekers that we've seen over the last 10 years. I mean, I think that you are looking at a kind of global prison industrial complex. I mean, that's already a picture that is emerging, and a kind of global industry in kind of walling off territories, and so I mean, as a kind of industry that will find lots of opportunities, that's going to be an area of kind of that capitalism can kind of profit from. We know that the capitalist system is adept at kind of finding opportunities out of crises, and that's one of the reasons why the system's been able to survive for the number of years that it has. You can make the contrary argument, and actually this is an opportunity for the end of capitalism, precisely because the root cause of climate, the climate crisis is overconsumption, and you can imagine various ways in which capitalism can try and respond to this crisis. Carbon trading being one. Very striking example, but whether or not those kind of techniques will actually overcome what this represents is certainly not something that you can assume at this stage. I mean, you can certainly imagine that all of these techniques that capitalism will come up with to try and profit from this and try and manage this will end up actually failing. I think it's an entirely open question as to what the impact of this will be on the future of capitalism.